I hope next time I move, I get a real easy phone number, you know? Something like 222-22222. I would say, yeah, you know? And people say, hey, Mitch, how do I get a hold of you? I say, just press 2 for a while. And when I answer, you will know you have pressed 2 enough.
So Mitch Hedberg, he's been on Letterman. Was it through that he got the development deal? I think it was from Fox, where he financed Los Enchiladas?
Yeah, but he had money from a development deal. And it was really admirable. Not many people do this. A lot of people, just like when people win the lottery, they get a development deal and they probably they buy a car. But what he did is he took it and he put it into his art. He said, I want to make a movie.
Yeah, tell us the plot of Los Enchiladas and why Mitch was drawn to making this story. If he had, he had this development money, he had the freedom to make anything he wanted with the development money. Why did he choose this story, and what was this story?
That's a funny way of phrasing it, and I don't know what any other options might have been. Here's the basic premise. If you know Spanish, you might think it should be called Los Enchiladas.
Okay, that's already a linguistic joke
but
there.
It's called Los Enchiladas.
Yeah.
And it's not a misspelling. It's just because it's about a cheesy chain Mexican food place in St. Paul, Minnesota. So it's not authentic.
Yeah.
Those are the key words. One of Mitch's favorite words was ridiculous. That's ridiculous. He loved that word. He's ridiculous. And this place is ridiculous.
Yes, that is science comedian Brian Malow, and you've tuned into another episode of Comedy History 101, where we school you in comedy. I am Harmon. Hello. It's good to be back in New York City, where I belong. Yes, I was in San Francisco for the last 2 months. Why? I was there to take their greasy tech money. But as they say in The Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home. And today, this very day, we are going to talk to Brian about the lost Mitch Hedberg movie, Los Enchiladas. Mitch Hedberg is one of the most beloved comedians of all time. His jokes are like little jazz haiku poems. He made dozens and dozens of appearances as a stand-up comedian on The Late Show with David Letterman. He appeared in the movie Almost Famous in The Lords of Dogtown. And tragically, he died at the age of 37. But his jokes live on in glorious splendor. And he has some of the most often quoted jokes of all time. And the reason that Brian is our guest today, he co-starred with Mitch Hedberg in a movie that Mitch directed and Brian and Mitch co-produced called Los Enchiladas, which was filmed in St. Paul, Minnesota, which revolves around a Mexican restaurant in the suburbs one day before Cinco de Mayo. The movie has never been officially released and has cameo appearances by Marc Maron, Dave Attell, Todd Barry, Nick Swartzen, and of course, Brian Malow, who is our guest today, who co-stars with Mitch in the film, which premiered in 1999 at the Sundance Film Festival. Brian, by the way, is a renowned science comedian. Yes, that is a category. And has not only collaborated with the likes of Neil deGrasse Tyson and Dan Aykroyd, but has also appeared on The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. And we are going to do a deep dive into all things Mitch Hedberg, Los Enchiladas, and we are going to talk about the upcoming documentary on Mitch Hedberg, which is being produced by former Comedy History 101 guest Julie Seabaugh, which we talk about at the start of the episode. But before we jump in, a few quick plugs. On Friday, July 31st, 7:30 at the Red Room, New York, I'm back, and I'm going to be hosting my show Attell, NYC's finest storytelling. No hokey gimmicks, no dumb themes. Attell brings you the best in New York storytelling. And you can find out all about my show dates on my site, harmonleon.com, or on the social medias at harmonleon. Also, take some time to show some CH101 love. Like us on Spotify, iTunes, leave a comment, leave no less than 5 stars, or check out our site, comedyhistory101.com. Or find us on Instagram at comedyhist101. And now it's time to jump into some Los Enchiladas. And without further ado...
You're stupid. Everybody's so stupid.
I'm trying to use the phone! Excuse me!
Comedy History 101. When I interrupted you by you providing knowledge and information as a guest of the podcast, what were you going to say about former Comedy History 101 guest Julie Seepa?
Yes, I saw her on your show.
Who was the writer and producer of the Marc Maron documentary, and also with, I believe his name is Jeff Siegel.
Jeff Siegel, nice Jewish fella.
Yep, who, along with Julie, is producing the Mitch Hedberg documentary. And she said she met Jeff, and that was like a passion project of his since he was a student at NYU to do a documentary on Mitch Hedberg.
Yes.
She said she did a long conversation with you, which would be also called an interview. Like conversations that actually end up as content are actually interviews.
Right. What's this? Has the show started? Are we on?
Oh, we started from minute one. We're very we're cinema verite. All the it's like there's a popular thing in documentary filmmaking now where you show the guy walk into the room and he sits in the chair and they show the slate board and it's like, oh, that's all a part of it. So this is the podcast version of that. And then everyone goes, that's so quirky that they use all the content in it when they could just edit that out and make it tight.
How long are we talking? Are we about to wrap up? That's all the time we have?
Yeah, anyways, that's all the time I have. Los Enchiladas, very interesting movie. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
I don't know how to come into this because we haven't talked about Mitch or anything yet.
You know, the baseball hat is the only hat that's crossed over into mainstream society to the point where you can wear it and not have people think you play on a team. No other hat is like this. Like, you cannot walk around with the chef's hat on without having people think you're looking for ingredients.
A lot of podcasts inside baseball, I put a teaser clip up front of the most grabby thing, because you got to grab the people. Yep. And then I do a little interlude. That's kind of the structure of the thing. And then launch in. So therefore, listeners/viewers will already know. And also, a thing about podcast hosting is you never let your guests talk. You always keep talking.
I was in downtown Boise, Idaho, and I saw a duck. And I knew he was lost because ducks ain't supposed to be downtown. There's nothing for him there. So I went to a Subway sandwich shop, and I said, let me just have a bun only. But they wouldn't sell me just a bun. They said I had to have something on it. I guess the two halves ain't supposed to touch. So I said, all right, put some lettuce on it then. So they said, all right, that'll be $1.75. I said, it's for a duck. They said, all right, then it's free. See, I did not know that. Ducks eat for free at Subway. Had I known that, I would have ordered a much larger sandwich. Let me have the steak fajita sub. But don't bother ringing it up. It's for a duck. There are 6 ducks out there right now.
If I were a space alien, hypothetically, how would you describe the comedy of Mitch Hedberg? And this will launch into Los Enchiladas.
Well, so if you were a space alien, just hypothetically.
Yeah,
And are you already familiar with the rest
I want to
of the-
stress that.
I know. So let's say
because it's
hypothetically
strange
you were a
because
space alien.
Yeah, because it's like, he's one of the most beloved comedians, one of the most influential comedians. Though, I was working in San Francisco and, they found out I did comedy and they go, who's one of your favorite comedians? I said Mitch Hedberg. And a lot of people still, on the fringe is not, he doesn't have complete broad stroke knowledge. So I'm just saying
Steve Martin or George Carlin or Richard Rod. But interestingly, Jeff Siegel has dug up clips of both George Carlin and Steve Martin saying something about Mitch back when he was alive.
Yeah,
about
I remember that Steve Martin quote. He was talking about this Mitch's joke. I used to do drugs. I still do, but I used to. And Steve Martin was quoting Mitch doing that joke.
It's that is so mind blowing to me, being someone who was just friends with him. It's such a weird thing when a friend of yours, who you knew for so long and way before he was anything close to famous, and then all of a sudden people talking to him about him being a genius, and about George Carlin and Steve Martin saying he was so clever, and Dwight Slade, great comic, who
was friends with Bill Hicks. Yeah,
and
in that documentary.
When I used to perform in Portland, I would usually get lunch with Dwight, and we would talk about our famous dead genius friends. And we had this thing where it's such a weird thing when it's like, yeah, I loved his comedy. I loved it. But you don't think of your friends as genius. It's just like, that's not even in the vocabulary when it's a friend of yours. And so it's so funny, like, to have the world treating this pal of yours, putting them up on this pedestal. So what I would tell an alien, I don't know, this alien is apparently familiar
going back
with
to the
basic
hypothetical.
stand-up comedy.
Well, no, he's new to stand-up comedy. He knows the art form. He knows the structure of, say, person in front of microphone at club, but he might not be familiar with the comedy of Mitch Hedberg. How would you describe?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I should say that back when, remember, maybe was that like in the 90s or whatever, that the alternative comedy scene was taking off? He was often kind of getting lumped into that and being invited to be on shows that were the alternative comedy shows.
I'm going to bring up your first act now. And I believe it was Eva Perón who once said, please welcome this next gentleman, Mitch Hedberg.
And he didn't think he belonged there because he thought the alternative comics were always talking about Hollywood stuff and their agents and managers. And he goes, I just tell jokes.
A lot of people flash the peace sign these days. It's cool to flash the peace sign, but I think it's cooler to express peace verbally. Hey, brother. 2.
But his jokes are not typical. Stephen Wright is someone he's often compared to in that he wrote these really interesting sentences that were often very surreal, and sometimes they don't even seem like jokes. They just seem like really strange sentences. Like, this one doesn't sound like a joke to me. I can't wait to get off stage because there's a roll of Lifesavers in my pocket and pineapple is next. It doesn't even sound like a joke, but it plays very funny. And they're just very unusual. But here's another thing, he never did political humor. Like, defining Mitch by what he's not. He never did political humor. Not only did he would cuss, but he never did graphic stuff, whether it was sex or typical male second grade humor. You know what? He never told fart jokes on stage or off. Even comedians, male comedians especially, even if they don't have fart jokes in their act, they laugh at them off stage. It wasn't funny. Mitch, bodily function humor was not humor to him. He didn't like it off stage or on stage. So he didn't have that. And a lot of his stuff was just like minutia. Like you could look at the content. Sometimes people are dismissive of comedians that aren't important. Like they think, Bill Hicks and George Carlin, but half of George Carlin's stuff right there, I stopped myself. Half of it was like social, political stuff, and half of it was just.
Then there's like in football, baseball,
word stuff and fart jokes. It's George Carlin who said, "You ever notice your own farts smell pretty good?" So he would go from deep. He would go back to back from socio-political commentary that was awesome to some stupid fart joke or word joke, which I love those too. So Mitch, I just think it's interesting that he didn't like that even off stage, not funny to him. And he wasn't into politics. He liked these weird, you might think of him as like a jazzy version of a stand-up comic. And he even did shows with a guy playing bass.
My friend asked me if I wanted a frozen banana. I said no, but I want a regular banana later, so yeah.
I think it was on one of his, back then is like a CD release.
Which also Bill Hicks actually did that with some guitar background on at least one of his albums. But bass is a little more jazzy. And so, they're very, some of them are surreal. Which I would use for Stephen Wright as well. And some of them are just, I don't know, they're very unusual observations. And you know what's something he was really good at? So early on, we traveled on the road together quite a lot. When I met him.
Yeah, that was my next question. When did he first come onto your radar?
Yeah, I have this. I have these old calendars, and I forget now, but it was in the 90s. And it was at a comedy club in Wichita, Kansas called Slapsticks, STIX, Slapsticks.
I imagine like one of the letters like backwards.
I don't remember, but it's definitely Slapsticks with an X. And he was the opening act. Mm-hmm. I was the middle act. And I'm not sure I remember the headliner. I think it was this woman from Colorado who has also passed away. But he and I and his girlfriend at the time, Jana, who he had been on the road
also
with.
his longtime manager.
Yes.
And we'll dive into Los Enchiladas later, but appears and produced.
Absolutely. And then I also know Lynn Shawcroft, his widow. Yeah, Slapsticks, Wichita, Kansas. And we just hit it off immediately. We shared a condo, comedy clubs either put you in individual hotel rooms or they stick you in an apartment. And the three comics and Jana was with him. We all had an apartment and we just hit it off talking about music and other stuff. And I liked his act.
Yeah, what do you remember how different than what it became from
I'll tell you what,
him as an opener.
When Mitch if Mitch did not want to do the type of things that an MC is expected to do.
So as an opener,
everybody, thanks for coming out. You're a beautiful crowd. Da da da. He didn't like to do that. All he wanted to do was tell his jokes. Yes. So sometimes if he was an opener at a club, maybe he wouldn't get booked back because that was a tough position. But when he came in as the middle act, he would almost certainly get booked back because he could just go on and tell his jokes and rock. And but if he had to play the role of MC, here's how he evolved. I would say, he obviously became a better writer later, but he also learned to command the stage more.
My name is Mitch. I was living in Seattle for about 2 years. I was living with a woman. She was a good friend of mine. She treated me like a king. She gave me this friendship card. It was a lot like a birthday card, On the front of it said, "A friend is one of life's most beautiful gifts." And inside the card, it had all these great quotes about friendship. It really touched me. It got me thinking, maybe I should quit stealing money out of her purse.
And so when I worked with him, he wasn't, this isn't a criticism at all. He was just earlier in his development. He had really funny jokes. He was easy for me to follow because I was higher energy and I had been doing it a little longer. So I was getting headline work where I could bring someone, shitty one-nighters and stuff. And that's why we started doing a lot of work together because, hey, we were quickly becoming good friends and I don't know exactly the timing, but I lived in Los Angeles from 92 to 95. And when we were living in Los Angeles at the same time, and if we were both in town, we would hang out. And if I had a gig that I could bring him to open for me, I would bring him to open or feature for me. And so we did a lot of gigs together. And actually, I was going towards this point. Here's an interesting thing about Mitch. We were on the road together, we spent the whole day together. And then on stage that night, he would have this new joke about something that I was there too, but I don't have a new joke about it. He was very prolific, and he was just really good at turning something that happened that day into a typical Mitch Hedberg joke that night. And it's just that funny thing where you're like, damn it, I was there, and how come I don't have a new joke? You know,
Was it a typical Mitch Hedberg joke in the early days, or was it he was still honing, those
some of
precious,
those jokes, some of the
diamonds?
classic jokes, like I don't know how old, I used to do drugs. I still do, but I used to too.
That was one
but
of
that's
his
a
first.
pretty old, I think that's a pretty
Yeah.
old joke. So, I think this is true with all of us. My third time on stage, I have a recording of, and there are some great bits in there. Also some cringy stuff. But I performed really well that night. My fourth time on stage, I bombed trying to tell the same jokes the same way. And so I learned an
And
important
you're going,
lesson.
why doesn't it work?
Yeah, but I learned a very important lesson.
Time
about-
3, you're like, I got this down.
I'm a genius.
I figured this out.
I did 2 open mics, and then I was in the Austin Funniest Person in Austin contest.
Okay.
And so the 2 open mics were rough. I prepared a set for my third time, and I rocked it. So I was like, yeah, this is easy. Then a few weeks, I made it to the prelims. So a couple weeks later in the prelims, I had gotten a recording of my set, and I had prepared a nice routine, and I was comfortable enough that I riffed within it. So then I had the things that I had riffed and everything. I just tried to repeat the magic my 4th time, and I learned that harsh lesson that it's not just about the words. That 3rd time I was being funny. And the 4th time, I wasn't. I was trying too hard to remember my jokes, I think.
Yeah,
but
you're in your head.
Bottom line is I just wasn't on, and I said the same words, but I kind of bombed the 4th time.
Yeah.
So I would say Mitch, I remember like one of my favorite early jokes of his was about how, when you're a comedian at a comedy club, often you appear on a radio station in the morning to promote the shows that week. So here was his joke. He goes, that one time we're doing radio, and he goes, I remember we went to the station, we were doing radio. The DJ's first question was, who are you? I didn't know if he was being really deep or we had driven to the wrong station. And that was a good joke. But I'll give you one that never got a laugh. But that thing where he wanted it to get a laugh and he kept trying,
Right.
but it never got a laugh.
He saw the promise in it. There's like always those moments of you want this to work so bad because you really enjoy doing it. What was the joke?
So that song, it was by Orleans. You're still the one that can make my hands, still the one from the 70s. So he goes, that song, You're Still the One? Like by then it's an old song. And he goes, do you think it's still true? Do you think she's still the one? But there really wasn't a joke there. But he just,
it's more like a statement.
Still the one?
Okay,
Still.
right.
So there wasn't much there, and it no one ever got on board. But comedy is so subjective.
Yeah.
I love some of his jokes so much, but there are some that aren't my favorites. And I'll mention this one. I mentioned it to someone and they go, oh, that's one of my favorites. But it's the one about like sometimes somebody's having a contest and there's a jar full of jelly beans and you have to guess how many are in it. And he goes, just let me have some. And I never like that. I just think that I don't connect with that as funny. I just think it's dumb. But I've heard people say that's like one of their favorites. So what are you gonna do?
When Los Enchiladas came about, that was and I read a good article, I think it was called In the Racket. It was a Minneapolis magazine. You were interviewed for it. I think it was like 1997, 98 was when it
must have been like around 96, 97, because we did, jumping ahead, we got into Sundance in January of 1999. So that's after editing had to have been done and everything. So it had to have been around 97, possibly just before. Actually, Jeff Siegel, if you ever want to interview him, he is he knows the details of Mitch's life. He's such a historian of his life now that he knows
or a documentarian of his life.
Exactly.
He's making a documentary.
So sometimes I'll ask him questions.
Yeah,
when was this?
right.
And I was able to go through and give him dates out of my old calendar. Like I found the week that we met and other little details like that. Mitch was at my place in San Francisco crashing with me right before he did his first Letterman. And
which I think was 1997. Was his first appearance on Letterman.
Is that right? Yeah, like I don't know, but I'll tell you that comedy clubs usually have to put up all the in smaller cities, especially the opener, the middle act, the headliner. They all get accommodations, but there have always been these cities that are big comedy towns like Boston and Chicago and San Francisco. They have so many comedians that they don't need to put up middle acts and openers because they can just use local. So if you want to go work there, you can, but they're not putting you up. And so
you'll have to take your $500 for the week and find yourself a hotel.
Or if you're lucky, so you know what it was? It was Dave Attell was headlining and Mitch was middling. And I have multiple videos of old shows of his. And one of them at the Punchline, it's Kevin Avery opening, but I don't know if it's that week. But Mitch was staying at my place and we were both getting into video. So I had already gone to graduate school and learned some video skills. And then he was starting to play with, like he early on bought a little camcorder. And whenever we were on the road, he was shooting stuff and I was shooting stuff and we shot each other. And so I have great video of him sitting on my bed in the apartment that I shared with Jim Short and Kevin Katsuoka and Kevin's girlfriend, Beth. He was crashing and I did a little interview with him. And some of this will be in the documentary. First of all, I have photos and video while he was on the phone with Zoe Friedman, who was the booker of the Letterman show. And he has his set.
Also daughter of Bud Friedman.
Daughter of Bud Friedman. And they were discussing which jokes he was going to do on his first set. And you can see the set list. And then I did a little interview with him. He's just sitting on my bed. And I was like, you know, you're about to do your first Letterman in like a week or two or something. And it's like, do you have any hopes or expectations? And he says, see, I think Jeff will use this because it goes together really nicely. Because Mitch says, he gets kind of quiet, kind of conspiratorial. He's like, you know, kind of like wishful thinking. Because he goes, I kind of hope it goes really well. And then they have me back on again. Or maybe even says like a bunch.
Our next guest is a talented comedian making his network television debut with us here tonight. Please welcome Mitch Hedberg. Mitch!
You guys feel good? Yeah. I feel very good too right now, I tell you, man. I've been walking around New York City. Anyone see me? I've been walking around checking it out. You know, people always trying to hand me out flyers, you know. When someone tries to hand me out a flyer, it's kind of like they're saying, here, you throw this away.
And that's exactly what happened. It went really well. And in that next period, he ended up doing 10 Lettermans in a relatively brief period of time. Like, there couldn't have been too many comics that Letterman was booking that frequently at the time, you know? So he must have really liked him.
Yeah, I remember like once Letterman calling back the Mitch joke, like to Paul Schaefer, go, Paul, are you worried about the Duprees?
Dufresnes? That's awesome. I know I don't know him well, but you know, Mitch often used like Mike Dufresne was a friend of his, an old friend of his pre-comedy. So that name, he used my name in one bit.
What was
it's not as good. I feel ripped off a little bit.
Mallow or Brian?
Just Brian.
Oh, okay.
But it's not as classic as the Dufresne bit.
Yeah, but that just has like, I think about that joke every now and then of how it's partially in the name.
Yeah,
the
you
funniness
think
of
the name
it.
helps it, yeah.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
is,
yeah.
but it is a great weird thought where they,
No, I
you
know.
know, Dufresne party of 2, Dufresne party 2, and then they
Yeah.
don't come. They call them again, Dufresne party 2, and then they come. They just go on to the next name, Bush party
Yeah.
of 3, and he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, but what happened to the Dufresnes?
Yeah.
People are missing. Who can eat at
Yeah.
a time like this? People are missing. Bush, search party of 3. You can eat when you find the, you know, and also that line about like the Dufresnes are in somebody's trunk with duct tape over their mouth and they're
Yeah,
hungry. That's a triple Rammy. So
Yeah.
You know what's
Tag,
funny?
tag.
that joke has a lot of tags, but you know, most of his jokes don't. And he once gave me hell. I'm not going to tell the whole joke, but remember I have this old Black Angus joke about how important the G is in that sign. And in the first line, I say that. But then I continue to say things. I never say the word anus. And I think that it gets funnier and funnier because I think the way comedy works, that there's an expectation that he's about to say the word anus, but I never say it. I keep dancing around the anus is how I like to describe it. I like come close to saying it, but I don't say it. And I think that tension there, it would build and build. But one time Mitch asked me, he goes, why don't you just stop after the first line? Because that's the joke. That's the joke in its entirety. And I'm like, well, like to me, what an absurd question. It's like, but it keeps getting funnier, you know. But to him, it's like all the information, it's done right there.
Right.
But he has a couple of jokes with multiple tags. You know, here's something else just about Mitch. I'm not saying that he lived extravagantly, but he spent money in a way that like he knew it was going to be okay. Like we were on the road and in between cities and we stopped in Chicago one night. And instead of getting a shitty hotel, we stayed at a nice Marriott and we went out to dinner and Indian food. And we went and saw, their name escapes me now, but a very cool band. Anyway, we had this whole fun night. But the fact that I'm not saying he wasn't ridiculous about it, but you know, when we were starving artists and we didn't have a lot of money, you know, you would stay at a Motel 6, you would stay wherever you could. He seemed to spend money a little bit like he knew it was going to work out, like that it was going to come eventually.
So he's been on Letterman. When did he come to you and say, I'm going to, and I believe it was because was it through that? He got the development deal. I think it was from Fox where he financed Los Enchiladas.
I can't tell you all the details of his career as well as some other people that weren't even friends with him at the time. But
he had money online.
But he had money from a development deal.
Yeah.
And it was really admirable. Not many people do this. A lot of people, just like when people win the lottery, they get a development deal and they probably they buy a car and they blow it on shit. And then
I heard they get bodyguards and then they walk into the, I just heard like stories of people blowing development, like they get bodyguards in an entourage and they walk into like the Laugh Factory in LA. Like, you just got a development deal, look, you know, and then their money's gone.
But what he did is he took it and he put it into his art. He said, I want to make a movie. Yeah. He had no background. Now, we had shot little things and he edited them one VHS deck to another or the camera to the VHS deck. So very sloppy editing and no formal training or anything. But there are some, you know, once there's Kay Frazier booked, I got gigs that it was a 2-person show. I brought Mitch. It was Ely and Elko, Nevada. And it was a big road trip. We drove from San Francisco to Nevada. We stopped at this amusement park at the border and rode this roller coaster. And we did just fun things. And then we did these 2 crappy one-nighters and drove back. And he put it together into something called I Love Nevada. And it had a lot of silly stuff, and it just also, and it had a bunch of songs by the Lemonheads. That's like kind of what we were listening to a lot. Like that's some of what we were listening to on the road on that trip. So there's a bunch of Lemonhead songs in it, and just us goofing off because we would like go into a gas station truck stop and get sandwiches at the little restaurant there, and you know he'd shoot footage of us interacting and being silly with the girls that worked behind the counter, and so
that was like his film training up right before directing.
And then he's like, he has this money and he earmarked a big chunk to make a movie. And the idea was, at that point, I was already living in San Francisco, I guess, and he was probably still in LA. But the idea was to make it back where he comes from, not St. Paul, Minnesota, but a suburb of St. Paul called Maplewood. Right. Oh, you're from Minnesota. And so he was from this very suburban, and his parents, you know, to the alien, you might genetically wonder where Mitch came from. If you saw his parents, he is like, how did this come from them? Like, where does he come from?
Oh, really? He's so not like his parents because his father. What I read was his dad and again, we'll explain the plot. His dad built the Euro costume.
Yeah. So his dad was an architectural draftsman. His mom worked at the newspaper, the Pioneer Press.
Oh,
and,
really? Okay.
And they were.
Was she a writer, a journalist, or just
I don't know what
paper?
she did.
Because there's other jobs at newspapers.
They're both wonderful. His mom eventually died of breast cancer. His father's still alive. They were wonderful, wonderful people. I've stayed at their house. I stayed at their house when Mitch wasn't. There's so much. I don't want to jump ahead. Hold on.
Yeah.
But hold on, Harmon.
Yeah. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
So they are just these wonderful, but like kind of like almost the Fargo version of like Northerners, like so sweet and not that Mitch isn't, but it's like, where did this long-haired freak with his unusual speech pattern and and his weird thoughts, and where did he come from?
But you know, and just a footnote, you know, we both knew him, and he didn't speak like off stage like that. You know, he just
but a little. Yeah, I know. I don't know how to answer people when they ask me about that, because he did a little bit, but certainly exaggerated. The way he would always accent an unusual syllable, right? Not the one you expect.
So he's from St. Paul, and he got the development money. Where did this unusual kid come from?
It made sense to go back and make the film in St. Paul because he had the help of his parents and so many friends.
Thank you. Help yourself to the shower. There's a shower cap if you need it. Hello?
If you can name this cereal in one bite.
Al, I ain't got time for this shit.
Well, that's gonna be your attitude. What you doing, man?
I'm painting an exclamation point on my hat right now.
All right. Would you do mine?
No, but I'll bring the paint to work. You can do it.
Tell us the plot of Los Enchiladas.
So
and why Mitch was drawn to making this story. If he had this development money, he had the freedom to make anything he wanted with the development money. Why did he choose this story, and what was this story?
You know, that's a funny way of phrasing it, and I don't know what any other options might have been, but when he approached me, he had a script, but it was insanely long. It was like 200 pages of script, and you know, especially a short comedy, but typically like a 2-hour film, you estimate a page a minute, 120 pages. And a short comedy might only be 90 or 85 minutes. I think it only ends up being about 85 minutes. But so he had like this 200-page script, and it was just a bunch of funny scenes, and there was no story at all. No arc. There was no story.
So my question immediately was like, did that first draft, was it more joke, like Mitch style jokes, or it was just funny scenes?
It was, you know, I have it. I'd have to go back. I haven't read it in years, decades, but it was, here's the basic premise. If you know Spanish, you might think it should be called Los Enchiladas.
Okay, that's already linguistic joke
but
there.
It's called Los Enchiladas.
Yeah.
And it's not a misspelling. It's just because it's about a cheesy chain Mexican food place in St. Paul, Minnesota. So it's not authentic.
Yeah.
Those are the key words.
Damn, He is negative in the morning. Man, I got a ton of shit to deliver today. Every Los Enchiladas in town has got a double order. What the fuck's going on?
Tomorrow Cinco de Mayo, man.
Oh, yeah. I got that 5 bands on the 5th of May jam tomorrow. That's some Mexican shit, isn't it? Because I got to learn La Bamba tonight at Lou Diamond Phillips' tune.
You guys play any originals?
Yeah, about 1/4 original. Okay, yeah, so this is what they do. They play 10 covers, and then they say, "This is one of our own," and everybody leaves the dance floor. Fuck you, man.
One of Mitch's favorite words was ridiculous. That's ridiculous. He loved that word. He's ridiculous. And this place is ridiculous.
Because then I started to buy ridiculous stuff.
And, you know, there's a scene that was probably in the original script where this couple, the salsa's too hot. They call the waiter and the salsa's too hot. And like the waiter doesn't know what to do. So goes back, because this is the mild salsa, goes back in the kitchen, puts ketchup and chops up some tomatoes and brings it to them, and they eat it, and then it's still too hot, and it's just ketchup and tomatoes. So they're ridiculous. So the thing is, Mitch, when he was younger, he had worked restaurants. He had been a line cook in shitty little restaurants, not fancy ones, as far as I know. And so he had
strategic grill skills.
Yes, he did it. His first album was called Strategic Grill Locations, and he knew his way around a grill. He could cook, he could barbecue, and he had restaurant cooking experience. And he actually worked this. We shot Los Enchiladas at 3 different restaurants, one for the exterior, and it was a Chi-Chi's. So the exterior was this Chi-Chi's that he had worked at in St. Paul. And we only
were
used
people from when he worked there still working there?
Probably.
Oh, you don't remember? Like,
we
hey,
didn't have
you're back.
As far as I know, we didn't have any permission for that one. And the other two...
Oh, it was just hit and run. Okay, yeah.
We just shot the outside as far as I know.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Because that was a chain. The other 2 restaurants were local restaurants. One let us use their kitchen and one let us use their dining area. So they were actually 3 different restaurants to make one. And you know... The restaurants were open during the day. So we were shooting all the restaurant scenes, and the whole thing is set at the restaurant pretty much, except a little bit at this hotel. It's pretty much set, and we were shooting overnight. So Jana was like the other major force, like Mitch and Jana. The first 3 people were Mitch and Jana, and they brought me in. And we're the producers. And we were also...
And how did Mitch... pitch the story, or what would be the synopsis, like, 3-4 sentence synopsis of the movie before, just to give listeners and viewers.
I don't know. I would have to say just what I said. It's like it's the goings on at this cheesy, inauthentic chain Mexican restaurant in St. Paul, in a suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota. And just the weird things.
That's the only way to quit a job, Chuck. You just walk out, man. Right out, you kick a Euro's ass and walk out. I know you've done it. Tell me you have.
I've always been pretty cool about giving notice.
See, that's your problem, Al. You need to walk out at least twice. Because as Americans, we're free, right? But rarely do we act on this freedom. We're always going from job to job, stuck in this fucking rut like a...
Don't rationalize an irrational act with patriotic rhetoric.
In the original script, not much happened at all. And you know what? I'd been to film school and I knew a little something. And by the end of it, like, I worked with him on the script and we got it much shorter, like probably 87 pages or something. And it had an arc, and where his character changed a little and mine changed a little.
Yeah, why don't you explain your role in it? So you co-starred with Mitch, and
all right. So we all work at this restaurant, and Mitch is like this guy who he's had a really interesting life. Like, he's traveled all around. I'm still living at my mom's house. I've done nothing, and Jana is this the cute love interest. Mitch is like big talker and tells these stories, these adventures he's had on the road. And we talk about going out on the road. It's like, man, I've never done anything and I would love to go out on the road with you. By the end, he's met Jana and he decides to stay. And he's written this like I forget what it's called. It's sort of like Hitchhiker's Guide. It's like a guide to like where to use bathroom, like when you're traveling and got no money, and where you could eat cheap. And I think he actually did write something up like this, and it's like a little guide for hitchhikers. It had a clever name. So in the end, I like want to go, let's go. But he decides to stay. So the drifter decides to stay and see what's going on with this new relationship.
The student becomes the teacher.
He gives me his little booklet, like video, like photocopies it at the gas station or something, and sends, and I go, the guy that's never been anywhere, and I go off on the road at the end. So it's like he has influenced me to go. So I know that his management, when he was like, he was obviously going to be the
Dave
star.
Becky was his manager?
Yeah. And 3 Arts Entertainment. Yeah. And I know that they didn't like this idea. Of course, he's going to be the star, but Jana and I, we have no acting experience. Why are we playing the other pivotal roles, like meant to carry the film? And it's like, I
so
think that
his
they
management didn't like that?
I don't think so. But you know what? Mitch was loyal to his friends, and we, for better or worse, we played these roles, and we had to act like we got no sleep because we were producing during the day, and then when the restaurant was closed at night, we were shooting for the film. So like when it
and you're also
correct
me if I'm wrong, all staying in an apartment in St. Paul.
Yeah.
Everyone,
so
was that good or bad?
Moved towards production. So you know what? Here was a fun part.
Yeah.
Mitch, I'm more gregarious, let's say, and outgoing. And also it worked this well. So when we went to Minnesota, we went to the local film institute, of local film production. I forget what they're called, ILF or ILC or something, whatever they were called. And we were like, we were looking for cinematographers and sound people, any advice we could get. And then when we went into these restaurants to see if we could use them, or this hotel to see if we could use it, I would do the talking, and I could pitch him as this quiet genius who he's been on Letterman, maybe more than once by that time, and his career's taken off, and he's the writer director, and so it kind of like, and I could schmooze the people, and like we ended up using 3 friends of his who were also at 3 Arts Entertainment, and probably all 3 managed by Dave Becky, which was Dave Attell.
I'm drinking Jack and I started blacking out. You ever black out? Or as I call it, time travel. You ever do that?
Marc Maron.
Turmeric. Yup. The spice? Yeah. You got to take it. Turmeric, the spice. Yeah, man, you got to take that.
And Todd Barry.
That's always the red flag in any Yelp restaurant review. If you see the words birthday party, it's going to be a good one.
Was that Mitch's first choice, or was that his management's choice? And again, this is all before they became stars.
Yeah,
and funny that Todd Barry, sort of in a restaurant locale, later went on to appear in the Darren Aronofsky movie The Wrestler as the grocery store manager.
Hey. Whoa.
Did you forget how to knock?
No.
Let's try that again, all right? I'm serious.
Oh, really? I never saw that film. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, they were all more established comics than we were, but they weren't as big as they would become. But they were all headliners with a lot of respect. They just weren't like quite household names or anything yet. But they were all respectable headliners. And they weren't the closest friends of Mitch, but he had access to them. So I don't, as far as I know, it was Mitch's idea. I have no idea if Dave had anything to do with that. I just assumed it was like, hey, you know, and they were good roles for these people. Like, wouldn't it be good to have Dave Attell, and wouldn't it be good to have Marc Maron and Todd? And they were all, so there was this core group of us. First, it was me and Jana and Mitch, but then Felicia Michaels, who at the time, she was a great comic and an old friend of mine. And at the time,
I did a show with her in Brooklyn maybe a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And she was technical director or something, like assistant director or something like that, maybe assistant director. And then Chard Hogan was this old friend of his from before I even met him.
Seattle.
Yeah, is he from Seattle? Yeah,
I think
and
so.
Tim
Yeah.
Schleck, this old pal of his, is a photographer who was the photographer on the set, and all of us got an apartment in downtown St. Paul for like a month or two, where we just lived on air mattresses. It was our production house and where we slept, and then Dave Attell, Todd Barry, and Marc Maron, they were just flown in for cameos. And you know what?
Yeah, did they do like a day or two of shooting each or?
Yep, just flew them in. They were not there at the same time. Like we flew Maron in and we had a day or two with him. I don't remember how long. But also part of getting this hotel to let us shoot some scenes in a hotel was we rented at least 3 rooms for a couple nights each for those guys. It's like, I don't know that we ended up paying, but we're like, we can, we'll buy several hotel rooms for several nights and for the nights we're shooting. And so, yeah, just flew them in. And you know what? They were kind of amazing. One thing I remember about Marc Maron is I think he had an acting coach at the time, and he prepared, and he came in having worked with his acting coach, I believe. And he was so good. He took this silly role and he elevated it to just this. Here's his ridiculous role. He comes into Los Enchiladas. He's a menu writer, and he wants to help them with their terrible descriptions on their menus. He can write better descriptions.
And to me, that's a very Mitch concept.
Yeah, it's very absurd.
I'm a writer too. I write menus.
A menu writer. Tell me more.
Well, I'm going to start off by being blunt. I read the Los Enchiladas menu, and it sucks. It flat out sucks. I'm sorry. Am I offending you, Chef?
By laying it on the line?
Good. Have you eaten at the Angelic Cafe on Grand Avenue?
I've driven by it several times. I'd say I'm very familiar with the front of it.
I did their menu. Do me a favor. Read garlic asparagus.
Dave Attell is the manager of the restaurant. He basically, I think the first time we see him, it's in the morning and he's had a hooker, I believe, and then he goes to work. And you mentioned this. It's the day before. Here's another absurdity. It's the day before Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo, the biggest day of the year at the Mexican restaurant. So it's Cuatro de Mayo. In Minnesota. I've noticed since I moved to Mexico, Cinco de Mayo is not as big a deal in Mexico as it is in the States. There are other holidays here, but it's Cuatro de Mayo. And Attell, I think, is already frustrated. And Attell also.
You mean Attell's character or Attell himself?
Attell himself brings something really awesome to the role that we did. Things that, it's an amazing thing. Like you write something, but then the actor brings something to it that you didn't even imagine. Like they were just words on a page, but Attell was so funny.
As all scripts are.
What's that?
As all scripts are.
Yeah,
words on a page. Yeah,
yeah, but what I mean is he brought it to life. Like he did things that we didn't expect, and like there was this great. And I'm sure this line wasn't in the movie, but the action probably was. Because we made sure we got one of those claw machines that you put a quarter in and try to pick up a soft thing, and they're pretty impossible. So before the restaurant opens, I think we had to acquire one of those and put it in the lobby of the restaurant we were shooting in. And then in the morning, Attell opens it up and he pushes all the things down, like to make them so that they're very hard to pick up, right? He makes sure he pushes them all down and then he goes,
everybody loses.
Everybody loses. And it's just put in this Attell voice, and it's so fucking funny. And I don't think that was even in the script. And so he's just really good. You said something about this. He does shave his head in the morning, but I feel like it was mostly shaven already. Like you said, somebody asked.
No, I think that was Austin Jennings on Facebook.
Jernigan, yeah, he asked is this the role that he shaved his head for and it never grew back? I don't know about that, but but he was bald in it. But he there's a knock at the door at the restaurant, and it's a guy in a big Euro costume, like gyro.
Created by Mitch's dad.
Mitch's dad built this styrofoam Euro costume. So he's like, it's like he's got the what do you call the bread part?
Pita bread.
The pita, he's got like pita around him, and some veggies are sticking out, and it's all made of styrofoam. Soft foam. And he's being really pushy, trying to interest the manager, Dave Attell, in something. And Attell just starts it loses his temper and beats him up. And then he leaves the restaurant. And so we haven't even opened, and the manager has bailed, and the chef takes control. And this is all to say that the chef's
really good.
The chef is really good.
And he was a local Minnesota guy.
Exactly. So we flew
actor in Minnesota.
We flew in those 3 cameos, and Doug Stanhope shot something for it that ended up on the cutting room floor. I don't know why Mitch didn't just include
also
it.
Nick Swartzen.
Nick Swartzen is in it, but only for a few seconds.
Uncredited,
you know what?
I think.
Do you know? So this was a visualization of one of Mitch's old jokes, actually. Mitch had a very old joke about how I like bread. And like sometimes, how a bread truck pulls up to a restaurant, and then the bread guy goes in the restaurant, and I have just a minute or two to get in and steal some bread and get out. And he goes, lately, I think the bread man is onto me, and he's trying to delay me by slowing me down. Cause something, when he went in the truck, there was this very tempting toaster, like plugged in. I can't remember the exact line, but the idea was, oh shit, there's a toaster. Maybe I should toast my bread,
They took raisin bread today, Greg. Oh, no way. Man, why don't you try and stop them? They're on skateboards, man. The wheel beats the foot. Plus, I've been in their position. Raisin bread is good. They're extra excited today. Well, I have to take that, Les. You should try to stop them by delaying them, Put a toaster in the back.
And that joke is actually acted out, is that this bread guy, who's also another comedian, Dave, I can't think of his last name, Dave, who was a local Minnesota guy.
Okay.
He takes the bread and goes into the restaurant, and Nick Swartzen and another guy or two come up on skateboards, steal some bread, and skateboard off. So Nick Swartzen is in it. But you'd be hard
that's funny.
pressed to notice.
Yeah.
He has a little cameo, but the rest of and then Chard Hogan, his friend, plays a good role, and Tim Schleck, the photographer, he plays a little role too. But then for everyone else, and Jana and me and Mitch, everyone else, we had auditions for local actors, and we just drew from the local, like St. Paul, Twin Cities area.
What was Mitch's style like when he's directing?
I don't know. I would say he wasn't very bossy or anything. He was like, you know what? We hired, and this is often the case, I guess. We hired these 2 guys to be the cinematographers. They were a duo, and they were very competent.
Like local cinematographers in Minnesota?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
And they were really good. And so, then we got a good sound guy, maybe on their recommendation. And so I think he was very trusting of everyone to do their job. I can't say much specifics. We're talking like 30 years ago, just about.
Yeah. And again, if you have a good cinematographer, and if you're like a first-time director, that's like half the battle.
Right. And in pre-production, we had discussed all this stuff. And so maybe, Mitch would have an idea for something that he visualized it. But as often is the case, the cinematographer they're going to know how to light it and shoot it and what the actual best angle is. Now, Mitch might have had some specific ideas for some shots, but as is often the case, the cinematographer chooses the best place to put the camera and takes care.
Yeah, and he had every single role. I mean, he was director, financer, producer, and star, and screenwriter.
You know,
of the
here's
project.
one thing. There was after Mitch died, there was this little mini documentary on the Comedy Channel or something. And in it, you know, someone who did some editing on it was that guy from the
Broken Lizard.
Yeah, Chandrasekhar.
Went on later, you know, Super Troopers and all those other fun films.
The manager called me up and he said, look, Mitch has a film. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes long. Can you help him find his movie? So he came in to the edit room, and the two of us sat in the dark, and I just went after it. I said, this is too long. Let's cut this. And we cut it down to about 75 minutes. And, you know, Mitch would get up and leave every 15 minutes and come back reeking of pot smoke. And I was like, you know, bitch, you can just smoke in here, and we'll get a lot more work done. And so that's what we did. We sat in that dark room and we just smoked joints.
I'm going to dispute something he says in that documentary because there's this scene.
What did he say in the documentary?
There's a scene where Mitch and Jana and I go into the big walk-in freezer and we are hitting a little pipe. And none of us smoked tobacco or anything else. And so we used weed in it and we did multiple takes. This guy says that we were so stoned we couldn't remember our lines and stuff like that. He says something like that.
Fuckers cash, pack it out, come on. I'm on it. Don't be handing me the cashed out pipe like that. So what is you got to get to the end?
And it's like, we wrote the scene. And we also improvised with, like, he should know, like, it was like, that was a weird, harsh judgment. It's like,
I mean, one of the Super Trooper scenes is in Super Troopers, the guy eats all his weed when the pull up. So
but he might have
should
thought
know
he was
weed
saying
acting.
He was saying it was challenging to edit because of that. But the truth is, it's like, we knew exactly what needed to happen in that scene. It was our scene. And so, and we weren't like lightweights where we weren't stoned out of our minds. That's also a weird characterization. But what happened is, like, I think we did multiple takes and we didn't want them to be all the same. We tried to make them realistic. So we knew what had to be said, and then you can improvise the rest. But of course, that means you just got to choose one take maybe. And you can, you know what I mean? Like, I can understand the challenges of that, but we knew what had to happen in the scene and we also improvised a little. And, but it wasn't because we were stoned out of our minds.
But how did he get chosen to be the editor? Because that was before Super Troopers kind of broke.
Exactly.
the
I
group.
think he must have been in Minnesota.
Maybe
I
the
wasn't
Three
involved
Arts or
in
something.
He
I
must.
don't think Super Troopers are from Minnesota.
I don't know, but he must have been.
Or
local
the Broken
because-
Lizard. Sorry.
Yeah, but maybe he was
okay.
I wasn't there for that part, but Mitch, I was involved in. So it's like, you know, there was a time during post-production, Mitch did run out of the money that he earmarked. So I feel like he had put aside $50,000. I don't know what his development deal was, but in my head, it seems to me, Jana would probably know this best, that he maybe dedicated about 50 grand. Well, that got us through the production, but they also started putting stuff on credit cards. And then during post-production, he had to go off and do gigs and make more money to continue post-production. And that was one of the times that I stayed at Mitch's parents' house while Mitch was on the road, and I handled a looping session, a day of looping where actors came in and redubbed in their lines from the original production.
What I liked about the film, there's like I think it's like a working copy that's on YouTube. It's not the final copy.
I wish people would look at it because it makes you think that the movie is crappier than it is.
Well, it's
the
just,
audio is horrible.
Yeah, it's not sound. Well, you just know because it's not sound mix and there's no color correction and all that.
Well,
but
the thing
again,
is,
go ahead.
No, it was. It is the problem with that is that I think it was taken from a VHS copy and maybe multiple copies. and there's a tracking error and the audio is horrific and it doesn't look good. And it's because it's many generations down and it makes you think that it's shitty, but it was we actually shot on film, on 16 millimeter film. And the version that aired, that we got into Sundance in this category called Park City at Midnight.
Okay.
And you know what else was in there that year was the Blair Witch Project. Overshadowed us a little bit. It was amazing. You know, Mitch was disappointed in the response that nothing really happened with it. But
what about the screening? Were you thrilled at the screening?
Yeah, that's the thing. He wanted everything in his career was going blockbuster, and it was a midnight movie at a place where everyone in there has already seen 3 or 4 movies that day. And then they put on a short that was this Star Trek parody that was filthy. And Mitch's sense of humor is not filthy. It was like not the right kind of opening for this film because it was raunchy, and this film isn't raunchy at all. And then by the time it came on, people are tired. But I think a lot of the crew and cast came, and I think we were all thrilled by it. And Mitch just, I think, wanted a standing ovation or something, and was like, and felt like it didn't play well. He should have been thrilled. You have no experience, and this film you made got in Sundance.
Yeah.
That is the win. And the fact that it didn't get a distribution deal, you know, it still might have, but I think he lost it. Like, I think he was disappointed and went back to his comedy career.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I liked about it is like when you see comedians make a movie or TV show, the character they play is a struggling stand-up comedian. And he didn't go that avenue of, I work by a restaurant by the day, but at night I do stand-up comedy. And he didn't go that direction, which we've seen a zillion times when they don't know what to do with the comedian. And, you know, I like that. Also, like, it's like in that era of, it's of its time in a great way, because it's like, you know, you have like Office Space and Clerks and Slacker, and you have, you know, it's that kind of character as well.
Yeah.
You know, this experience with Mitch Hedberg, what do you think Los Enchiladas' place is in comedy history?
Well, right now it doesn't occupy too much of a space, but when Jeff Siegel and Julie, when this documentary project comes out, we are all hoping that it not only reignites interest in Mitch, which, you know, I would say it's true that he's, as you said, lots of people don't even know who he is, but he is so beloved by the people that know of him. And I think his popularity has grown since he died, and the love for him certainly hasn't faded. And you sure see a lot of him on stage. You know what? I mentioned his name to someone and they didn't recognize it. And I go, you may have heard some of his jokes. And I mentioned, first I said I used to do drugs. And he was like, oh yeah, I know that joke. And it's like, so he didn't think he knew who Mitch was, but it turned out he actually had heard some of his stuff. The hope is that it reignites interest in Mitch, and perhaps in this movie, which, again, Marc Maron, Todd Barry, Dave Attell have these great roles. Mitch is the star. It could be like a little Clerks. It's like, it's not amazing. It's a weird, quirky little piece of his life. And I know that at least all the people that love Mitch, they want to see it and a good version of it. Right now, I don't think it occupies much of a place at all, except, but I think that there's a chance that it could be kind of like a little Clerks, like interesting little low budget, very low budget. When we were at Sundance, Robert Altman, for instance, had a new film that was, you know, a multi-million-dollar big production, sort of like that's an independent film. This was a truly independent film, you know?
Yeah, and then also Marc Maron and Mitch in a movie together. They would also be in a movie together, Almost Famous, just like 2 years later.
I'm gonna report you to every promoter in this country. I'm gonna talk to what? What is that? What is that? What are you, Bruce Lee? Lock the gate!
I'll tell you this little story. I don't know when it would have been, but one time Mitch called me and he said, "Hey, I'm on the set of this Cameron Crowe film." It didn't have a title yet. And he goes, I have this one scene where I'm playing poker, and I think he's like the Eagles road manager or something like that. I forget what his, and he has a scene, but Peter Frampton is one of the other gamblers in the scene with him.
Yep.
And I think he said they were smoking fake pot. Did he say something about that? But just the idea that I just remember, and it's like that would end up being almost famous. Like here, it's just some unknown Cameron Crowe film, and didn't know that Maron had a part in it yet either. And Maron has a great little role. Mitch, you have to look really hard to see him, but they did shoot more. It would be super cool if Cameron,
get the outtakes.
if Cameron Crowe has any other footage of him.
Yeah, I think that Mitch's joke was, I smoked fake pot with Peter Frampton. I'd rather smoke real pot with a Peter Frampton impersonator or something like that.
Or it's better than smoking fake, which I've done way more times, like with someone that looked like Peter Frampton or something like that.
And just a couple last questions about Los Enchiladas. What was the hardest you laughed during production, either when the cameras were rolling or when the cameras weren't rolling?
I don't know. I think I have one little thing to tell you that I remember, and I remember it because I had a production binder with tons of notes. And I think we had a blast through the whole thing. There was one ridiculous thing that I did after we sent Dave Attell home. We realized we needed a shot of him peeling out in his car, leaving the restaurant, but he was gone. So I put we had Los Enchiladas hats and shirts, and it was kind of off-white. I wrapped one of these shirts around my head so that from behind it would look like Dave's bald head, and I drove the car. And I don't remember what the shot looks like, but the idea was if you see me through the back window, it couldn't be my hair. It had to be faking his head. But here's what I remember was a typical funny Mitch observation. While we were staying in this hotel in downtown St. Paul, Mitch and I got a membership at the YMCA, and we went over and we worked out a little bit. And one day we were on treadmills next to each other. So he was walking and I was running, and he looked over and he said, "You should be passing me." It was just one of those little Mitch observations. But other than that, it's just like everything was so ridiculous, to use his favorite word, that I think we laughed just constantly on stage and off, these absurd, watching Maron and Attell do these and also I haven't said Todd Barry. He also was this ridiculous character.
I brought my own girlies.
We couldn't have imagined from the page how they would bring those characters to life. They were all great. And then the chef, this ridiculous character, and this all of them. And one guy, after we had cast everything, we just had one part that we couldn't cast. We had trouble finding that we needed someone really ridiculous. And then after the casting session, we were at a local restaurant, and at a certain point, we noticed that the waiter, he could play that part. And we asked him if he was an actor, and he was.
Really? Randomly in Minnesota.
Yep.
And how does it feel like watching clips of that, all these years later? What does it feel like you, or does it feel like watching someone else? Or does it put you right back into the place?
Ago. My hair is dyed too. We sort of tried to dye it blonde, and it ended up this gross, orangey blonde, platinum color to make me look younger. And I'm not wearing my glasses, which meant when we were doing scenes, I had to take my glasses off. And I think in that freezer scene, I kept putting them on and taking them off, and I think we got at least one take where I accidentally had my glasses on, and it's like, oh shit, forgot. But yeah, it was so long ago that it is like watching somebody else. Mitch is long gone. his mom is gone, and just like, it's so weird when you look back on other parts of your life like that. Because it was a major project, you know. We maybe we were only in downtown St. Paul for 1 month, but we were working on it months before and after, and so much. And then it got into Sundance, and we all went to Sundance, and that was a big fun event, with some complications, but it was interesting. And then, like I said, we butted heads a little bit. And maybe, you know, I should have kept my mouth shut because it's his project, but I took ownership in my position. And it's like, I was like, if I thought I was right about something, I stood by it.
Oh, right. Okay.
He wasn't this genius. He was just my friend. Right.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not going to I wasn't just going to be a yes man to my buddy. I was going to say, I think this. And so we butted heads a little bit, and then he got into some harder drugs than I was into, and later, and he kind of separated himself from people that were close to him. But like I said, in the end, I think we came, like, I did see him a few times, and it was nice. And I think we were making progress towards becoming friends again, right at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. And it's like, was a rip in your friendship like due to production stuff, or just like what you just mentioned, him getting into like other stuff?
Hard to say. I think the thing is they coincided. And you know, he also broke up with Jana and then started seeing Lynn. It's like, so all of this stuff to me, like in a relatively, you know, happened at the same, all sort of happened at the same time. And so hard to say. Hard to say.
And do you think the film will ever be released in a new edited form or sound mix?
I don't think it'll get, I don't think it would be re-edited. I do think there's a chance. I think there's a very reasonable chance.
Oh, after the documentary.
That after the documentary comes out, that the film could come out with with an actual proper release. Because it played at Sundance 2 or 3 times, 2, 3, 4 times, I don't know, you know, in a space of a few days. And then nothing really came of it. Sometime like during the pandemic, like probably more towards 2021 though, is when Jeff Siegel first reached out to me and about his dream project to make this documentary about Mitch Hedberg. And
just to back up, Jeff, you know, he had this since he was NYU, and then he went on, was he a writer on The Daily Show? Or I think he was on, one of the late night talk shows.
Oh, he's done a lot of stuff with Billy Joel. And he made a great documentary about this, a baseball documentary about this guy that has caught more balls at Major League Baseball games than like anyone else.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great documentary. So I was interested, and he came and visited me. And back then he first did a lot of pre-interviews. So he came and just with a DSLR shot an interview with me. And that's when he also first must have connected me with Julie. But it turned out there was this one little bit about my relationship with Mitch that I always wish I could remember more specifically, but I have a terrible memory. And that is, we had been very good friends for many years. And then we were a little estranged. We were sort of in the process of maybe reconnecting and when he died. And the last I heard from him was a voicemail I got that was like, hey, we should do some gigs together. And then I left him a message saying, yeah, let's do it. And then sometime later he was dead. And the interesting thing to me was that Julie had interviewed me around the time Mitch died, shortly after his death. And she sent me the notes, just written notes from the interview. And it was 2 weeks after that phone tag that he died. And that's like a little fact that I'm glad to have that I never would have remembered. But apparently shortly after his death, I told her. It was about 2 weeks later. So that's a real shame. Yeah. In a couple cities I hosted, and I showed some of my home video footage, and we showed Los Enchiladas. So it's been shown a handful of times, but it's never gotten a proper release.
Yeah.
But I think it could.
Well, yeah, maybe with the documentary, because again, capable. I like the Maron doc. Yeah, also strange.
And
like
compared
Julie
to them,
did both the Maron and Mitch documentary.
Maron and Attell and Todd Barry are all bigger names than they were back then.
Yeah, but he also think because like Mitch, again, he got so much heat like at Just for Laughs that he could have pushed it, using leveraging that, but didn't.
I know. I think he had really high expectations and then was disappointed in the response. And I think that colored what happened afterwards, because they should have sought distribution, but that would have been at that point between him and his management. And like I said, Mitch and I took a little time to ourselves.
Yeah. That's, too bad, but at least, you guys were communicating at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, who knows what would have happened? And who knows, his material was so good for like Twitter and everything, like his short form.
Yeah, he was pre-social media, but now, you look at his videos on YouTube and they get, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views, because that type of comedy is not, it won't date because it's,
it's not topical.
But it's like, and again, I wouldn't necessarily branch him into a one-liner comedian, because it's just like, they're like little short haiku stories,
Yeah. I'll tell you, from a perspective of like the science of comedy.
Yeah.
One of his most beloved jokes, I think, and one of my favorites, because it's amazing. It's the Bigfoot joke. And, typically a joke has a setup and then a punchline. This joke is a great non sequitur. It doesn't matter what he said before. Out of nowhere, it starts with the punchline and then has several more. It just starts at 100%. I think Bigfoot is blurry. That's the problem. It's not the photographer's fault. Bigfoot
you don't
is
even
blurry.
need a setup. Yeah,
And
the
that's
punchline
extra
is the
scary
setup.
to me,
Yeah.
because there's a large out of focus monster roaming the countryside. And sometimes he would go, run, he's fuzzy. But it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, no setup.
The
it's
setup
just,
is the punchline.
boom. Yeah, and you're just off and running immediately. It's so funny.
Bigfoot is blurry, and that's extra scary to me because there's a large out-of-focus monster roaming the countryside.
Where can people find you and your science comedy?
I'm on Facebook. It's just Brian Malow. It's so frustrating. I do have a science comedian Brian Malow fan page, but I don't even want two Facebook pages. And I'd rather people connect with the Brian Malow one. But on Instagram, I'm at Science Comedian. And that's the social media that I use the most. And I'm not even that active on there. But at Science Comedian, I used to be on Twitter, not so much. What else is there? Am I forgetting? I'm on Threads as at Science Comedian.
Can people find you anywhere?
Oh, and on YouTube, Science Comedian is my channel as well.
Well, Mr. Malow, a pleasure. And that wraps up today's episode on Mitch Hedberg and Los Enchiladas. And Brian will be back on a future episode where we do a deep dive into his history of being a science comedian. And once again, quick plug, on Friday, July 31st, 7:30 at the Red Room, I'll be presenting my show Tale, NYC's finest storytelling. No hokey gimmicks, no dumb themes. Tale brings you the best in New York storytelling. And check out my tour dates on my site, HarmonLeon.com, or on the social medias at HarmonLeon. Also subscribe, comment, share an episode with a friend of Comedy History 101, wherever you get your podcasts, or on our site, comedyhistory101.com, or on Instagram, comedyhist101. And until next time, bye-bye.
Everybody's so stupid.
I'm trying to use the phone!
Comedy History 101.